Good afternoon, guys. All right, like she mentioned, my name is Aaseesh Marina, and I work as part of the search. I used to work as part of the search quality team, but now I'm part of the research and outreach team. Uh, I hope, there's been like 3 to 4 sessions so far, so you're not tired because I'm really excited about talking on how you can manage your online presence on Google search, right? So my session contains just a very few topics. On first one on how search works. So I'm going to talk to you about how Google search works in the first place, and then a few tips on best practices that you can follow for making your site more visible on search. And finally, I'll leave you with some resources where you can just refer back to them once the session is done. All right. So how search works. So how many of you are interested in, don't tell me how search works, just tell me the top ranking factors instead. Two? No one else? No one else wants to know ranking factors instead of how search works? Okay, now I see a lot more hands. But the funny part is, while there are some known ranking factors, there are no top factors that always make your site rank #1 in search. Nobody, even Larry Page, doesn't know the top ranking factors to make his site rank first in search, right? So the reason why I'm doing how search works is anytime you're using a system, ideally if you understand how the system works, only then can you make full use of that system, right? So only when you understand how search works in the first place, will you be able to use it and make sure your content appears properly on search. So taking a step back, I know a lot of you are students, but does anyone remember search way back in 98 or 2000? Anyone? No? I see like 2 hands. So then it was, you just typed keywords and you got 10 blue links. Then it was very revolutionary. But today, if Google shows these kinds of results, no one will use Google, right? Because everybody here owns smartphones. Everybody in this room probably owns smartphones, and we expect there to be almost 5 billion folks owning smartphones. So we can't just give blue links anymore. We need to evolve so that we focus on the user and help him get the right result. We can't just keep giving blue links, right? Google search has also, on this basis, has evolved, and now it's not just blue links. We give video results, we give image results, we give knowledge panels, and sometimes for movies you have like movie links and book links and software links and whatnot, right? So Google search has been evolving just to make sure we meet the user's needs. But since 1998, our core mission has always been the same. It's to organize all of the world's information and make sure everybody can access it and it's useful for them. And basically we show the information in a useful manner for everyone. But you are typing a query, right? But Google has hundreds of billions of pages in its index. How does Google show you the answer? You don't want all those hundreds of pages. You want the answer, right? When you're typing something like, who won the 2016 US elections, you don't want to know, you don't want 100 different pages with a lot of information on them. You want an answer, right? So how does Google do that? Well, the first step is to get the information in the first place, which is called crawling. So Google has a bunch of robots or crawlers, which we call Google bot. So just like a browser. So you use a browser to, you request a URL and that URL comes up in your browser, right? Similarly, Google has robots where we request the pages on the web and we access those pages, make copies of it. And whenever we find links on those pages, we go to more new pages through those links, and so on and so forth. We try to crawl all of the web. Obviously, there are more new pages being created every day than we have already crawled. So it's a never-ending process. But yeah, so the crawling step is first to make sure we go and are able to access content in the first place and then make copies and get those copies back into Google. And those copies are stored in Google's index. So we have hundreds of billions of pages in our index, and for each page we extract signals. So seeing some interested heads out there, but this is where this is the place where we extract signals from a page. We determine the usefulness of a page. Right? We extract the keywords from that particular page. We extract how fresh the content is and the links that are linking to these pages. So all of this information is extracted for each page and they're stored against that page in Google's index. So now we have hundreds of pages and we have signals for each page. So when you request a query, like I said, we obviously can't give you all the hundreds of billions of pages for each query, right? Even if we find like you type Donald Trump, and even if there are millions of pages that have Donald Trump, we have to have some way of ranking those pages so that we give you the right page for Donald Trump in the first place, right? So that's where our algorithms come in. So we have a bunch of algorithms to help us show you the answer instead of just a bunch of hundreds of links that just potentially may contain the same keyword as the query that you put in. So firstly, for the query itself, sometimes you may type something like Pokhara tourist places, right? That's a very simple query. But Google has to understand that query, that not just in Pokhara tourist places, we can't just pick keywords. We have to understand the whole query. We have to understand that this user is looking for the top tourist places in Pokhara. And so that once we understand that, we can give him the right result, right? So just understanding the query is a big step for us. And then we have algorithms that try to rank the pages that we have for those queries. So we have millions of pages. So for each page, we look at the signals, like I mentioned, right? We look at content freshness, we look at keywords, we look at links. And I'm sure, how many know the algorithm that Google uses based on links? Yeah? Can you shout it? Can you shout it out? Sorry? Spider? No. It's named after our founder. PageRank. Has anyone heard of PageRank? Anyone? No? No, that's not true. That's actually a myth. PageRank is not gone. Google still uses PageRank. So Google uses an algorithm called PageRank to understand the links coming to a page and how valuable those links are. Based on that, we give a score for a page. Right? That's one of the factors we use to rank our pages. So PageRank is one factor, website freshness, speed, secure, and how relevant, whether user can find the content he's searching for in the page. That is also very important because if you hide the content under some CSS brackets and Google user can't see it, then that's not very useful for us to rank that kind of content, right? So a lot of those factors come into place where we rank these pages. So now we understood the query, we use algorithms to rank the pages. Then we also have another set of algorithms just to make sure spammy sites don't rank. So because there are always some sites who try to game the system by dumping a lot of keywords or buying links or just inserting hacked pages into other websites so that they link back to their website. So all of these spammy techniques, and I've heard in many events that I've attended that many people use PBNs to share links, which is still against our guidelines. So we have a bunch of algorithms to make sure these kinds of pages don't rank over the other legitimate pages, right? So 3 steps, understanding the query, ranking the pages, and making sure bad pages don't rank. And finally, like I mentioned, we have our search results come up in a variety of forms. So when you're searching for directions to the airport, if we simply give you a blue link, that's no good. Even if we give you a blue link of Google Maps, that's no good. But instead of that, if we show the Maps folder where we say it takes 15 minutes to reach by car, and we also give an option to reach by, check the time by bike or by public transport or whatever. Yeah, so, sorry? Yeah, walking, of course, walking. Yes, so that gives that kind of response is far more useful than giving a blue link. Similarly, if someone's searching for thriller videos of Michael Jackson. If we simply give him images of that instead of videos, or if we link to a thumbnail with just the image, that is, sorry, if we link to a thumbnail with an image where user can immediately click and watch the video, that's far more useful than simply showing a link of, YouTube link to Michael Jackson's Thriller or whatever, right? So the gist is that Google has evolved since 1998 to make sure the results that you see are far more useful than just either blue links or just a simple answer. So even for calculator, if you type 15 into 10, you'll get the answer instead of a link to a calculator website. Similarly, if you ask for weather in Pokhara, you will get the weather with the temperature instead of getting a link to a weather website, right? So this is how we're trying to improve our search results. In fact, a lot of you can create your own knowledge panels. So if you own a website or an organization or whatever, you can create your own knowledge panel that shows up on Google. So I'm sure when you type like the name of a president, you'll see his knowledge panel, right? His photo and like specific information and related people and so on. So if you own a website, using structured data, you can do that for your own organization or your own CEO or whatever. As long as you provide the right information, Google can help your website content also be shown as one of those useful responses for users. Okay, now I have a quick, some best practices for making sure your website is far more visible in search. And I'll basically be talking about 4 kinds of best practices. One is making your site more search friendly. So if your website has search results that show up on Google search, what can you do to what are some small improvements that you can make to improve your search result? And then most of the users today are mobile, are visiting your websites on mobile. So you'll obviously need to make sure your website is mobile friendly, not just for users, but also for Google. So, because only if Google understands that your page is good on mobile, will we be able to show your page in mobile search results, right? And then speed and security. Okay, this is a typical search result, right? Everybody seen a search result like that. So if we look at certain components of this search result, so first we have the title, and then we have the URL structure, and by that it also determines the site structure. And then we have the structured data, which is the star ratings and the time taken to make the recipe and so on. And then we have the description. So I'm at a WordCamp event, and I'm sure a lot of people use plugins to help you do this, right? So that's fine, that's completely fine. But one thing to keep in mind is titles don't always appear the same for your page. You may have set a title for your page, but depending upon the query. So for this particular page, instead of Daltur Amti, if someone searches for how much, a specific ingredient, how much onion should I add in this particular recipe, right? So then the title of the page could change based upon the query. It could say onions in Daltur recipe by Sanjeev Kapoor, something like that. I mean, obviously I'm just guessing, but my point is that titles of a particular page will change depending upon the user query, right? And for different users, the title will be shown differently. So what you need to make sure is the actual page title in your content, not the one that you put in your title tag or that the one you use in your plugin, but the actual page title and the subheadings, where for the recipe section, for the ingredient section, that needs to be very clear as well. You can't just ignore the actual content in your page, right? So because once you do that, if Google doesn't find the title in your title tag relevant, we'll just pick the one from your actual page. Does it make sense? And regarding structured data, again, so I'm not covering structured data today, but you can read up on how you can add structured data to help Google understand your pages a lot better. So gone are the days when, if you add like a bunch of keywords, Google will look at how many keywords are there, and depending on that, make a decision. That is probably the most primitive of search engines. So now we try to actually understand the content in a deeper level. And if you provide structured data, if you add structured data to your website that tells us, hey, this is the title of the article, this is the date of the article, this is the body of the article, this is the image of the article, this is the author of the article. If you add specific structured data schema tags and tell us that, that will help us understand your content a lot better, right? And obviously, when we understand it a lot better, if it is supported, we'll show things like star ratings and calories and whatnot. But if it is not supported, at the very least, we'll still understand your pages a lot better. And another important search-friendly thing that you can always do is make sure your site is accessible in the first place. So I've talked about crawling, right? Crawling is the first step where Google comes and accesses your page in the first place. So one way you can check whether Google is seeing your site properly or not is by using the Fetch as Google tool in Search Console. So once you use this Fetch as Google tool, so it will show you how users see on one side and how Google is viewing your page on the other side. For example, if you block CSS, resources, or let's say you blocked one WordPress folder, the WP includes or something that has your CSS and JavaScript files, then Google will not be able to render your page like how a browser renders. Because Google follows these rules called robots rules, and under those rules, you've blocked some CSS files or JavaScript files that help Google render your page. But if you block them, Google will not be able to see it exactly like how a user does. And this is very problematic for mobile. Because in mobile, your CSS files will determine how your page looks, right? So if your CSS file is not being loaded by Google, we'll probably think, that page doesn't fit the device, users have to scroll horizontally and so on. So that is very bad for users because Google will not be able to show your site as mobile friendly in search results. And if we don't think your site is mobile friendly, we will not show you high enough in mobile rankings. And that's bad for you and for your users because they're missing out on your content and you're missing out on them. And another tool you can check to understand how your website is there in Google search is URL inspection tool, where this also resides in Search Console. This is a relatively new tool, but you can just simply type your URL in URL inspection tool and it will show you the state of your URL in Google search. It will tell you whether the URL is indexed or not. If it is not indexed, it will give you an option to request indexing. If it's already indexed and you made changes, but you feel Google is not crawling it quick enough, you can again still request indexing. And it will also show you if there are any errors, like what HTTP header response this particular URL is sending Google. For example, you may think your URL works fine, but for Google, Google is seeing a 500 response. Google is seeing a server error. So that will be reflected in URL inspection tool. So then you can go back and check, okay, so there's a firewall that is blocking some IP ranges and Googlebot is being blocked, so I can go and fix it so that Google can access my content. All right, now we'll switch to mobile friendly. So like I said, everybody is on mobile. So I'm getting signals saying my session time is over, so I'll try and wrap up quickly. But so very quickly, the do's and don'ts of making sure your website is mobile friendly. First one, make sure you set your viewport correctly. So how many here understand how a viewport works? I see 1, 2 hands. So viewport, just to explain to the rest of the folks, viewport is how your browser decides how to show your page, right? Viewport decides, if you set the viewport, it will help your browser scale to the device width and make sure your pixels scale in a 1:1 ratio to whichever device you're using. If you don't set the viewport, the browser will not show your page correctly, right? And then you also need to set proper redirects. If you're using, instead of responsive design, if you're using a separate mobile URL and a separate desktop URL, I've seen a lot of cases where for the deeper URLs on desktop, those, instead of redirecting to the respective version on mobile, they redirect to the home page on mobile, which is a bad experience for users, right? And if we see these kinds of faulty redirects, there's a Google penalty of sorts in mobile. So if we see faulty redirects, we don't rank those kinds of pages. And I'd also suggest using the mobile-friendly test tool. So mobile-friendly test tool will, it may not show you the redirects, but it will also always give you important information on how your page is being seen by Google. So if we can't load resources, that will be shown in mobile-friendly tool. And obviously, how many here heard of mobile-first indexing? Okay, I see a lot more hands. So for the rest of the folks, mobile-first indexing is where we consider the mobile page to be the primary version and desktop to be the secondary version, right? So we index the mobile page first. So we've started migrating websites to mobile-first indexing in the last 1 year. So it's very important that you don't have different content between mobile pages and desktop pages. If you do have different content, then we will currently we are not indexing, we're not doing mobile-first indexing for those kinds of pages, but if you want to be eligible for mobile-first indexing, you need to make sure your content is same between both desktop and mobile versions. And of course, like I said, you don't want to block resources. Make sure you're not blocking any resources, because if Google can't render your page properly because some resources are being blocked, then we'll not be able to show your site in mobile rankings. So this is how the mobile-friendly test tool looks. For example, we'll show you a snapshot of how we are able to render the page. And if we are not able to load resources, there your page will look differently. And that's where you can go and fix it. Okay, because I'm out of time, I'll go very quickly here. So I think everybody agrees that slow loading websites are bad. So these are some, just very quick numbers. Half of the people will abandon a website if it takes more than 3 seconds to load. Right? So I'll just skip the other stats, because that pretty much tells you that if you have a slow loading website, people are not going to stay on your website. So we have a bunch of tools to test how your website is performing and what you can do to make sure you improve your website's performance. Of these, I personally recommend Lighthouse. All of these are Google-related tools, but I recommend using the Lighthouse. There is both, it's an extension, and you can also use it in Chrome's inbuilt inspect section, where using Lighthouse, you can audit your website, your web page, to see how much time it's taking for the first paint, right? And how much time it's taking for certain resources to load, how you can optimize your images to make sure your website loads faster and whatnot. Okay, how many here think it's important for websites with credit card information, websites that take credit card information, to have HTTPS? Really? Others don't think websites with credit card information need to have HTTPS? Okay. But how many think, okay, not just credit card, but if it has any kind of login and password, it needs to have HTTPS. What about no login, no password, no credit card, just a regular website, regular blog with images and text? Okay, now I see only like 3 or 4 hands. But the thing is, all websites need to have HTTPS. All websites. Why? One, it helps with identity. So if you have a valid certificate that tells the user that he's communicating to the right website and not some phishing website or anything like that, right? And second, confidentiality. So whenever you use a website, you're requesting for resources, right? And you're probably performing clicks, and you're looking at different resources on the website, you're clicking different links on the website. All of that is information. And that information goes back to your website. But if you don't have HTTPS, there's a chance that attackers could compromise that information and pull that information in between. And they can, they could do anything with that information. Do you want, if you go to a website, do you want every behavior that you did on that website to be seen by someone else other than the website owner? No, right? So obviously you need to have HTTPS even for regular websites. And finally, integrity. This is for website owners. So when you request a resource, for example, you're requesting an image from a website. You type example.com/some image. If you don't have HTTPS, there's a chance that someone in the middle, it's called man-in-the-middle attacks. Someone in the middle can, instead of the website image, they can change that image to something that he wants, and he can show that image to the user. That image could contain malware, or that it could just be like a propaganda image, anything. But it basically spoils the integrity of your website, and as a website owner, you will not be showing the content that you think you're showing to your users. Someone is compromising it in the middle. So obviously you will lose a lot of integrity, and having HTTPS will protect you from this. So quick line of important things to remember. First one, make sure your software is updated. This is a no-brainer. You have to keep your CMS updated. In case your company folks say it costs a lot to update, just remind them that if it does get hacked, if some vulnerability gets exposed, that will cost even more, right? And you have to implement HTTPS. And make sure you're implementing HTTPS in the correct manner. So I would suggest there's this website called let'sencrypt.com, LETSENCRYPT, let'sencrypt.com, where you can get free certificates, right? So just you can use that, and it gives you a full introduction of how you can install the certificate and make sure it covers all your website pages and not just your main domain. It makes sure you cover all subdomains and all pages from your website, and all resources too. Because if you have your website HTTPS, and if you don't have the images and certain content in your website covered under the certificate, that is still a security issue. And also make sure you verify your site in Search Console. So Search Console gives you updates on if your site has got hacked, or if there's malware issues with your site, or if someone's doing social engineering attacks, like phishing attacks on your website. Search Console will give you an immediate intimation of this particular attack so that you can act on it quickly. And finally, make sure you set up automatic backups for your website. So even if you do get hacked, you can simply revert back to your old backup, and in the meantime work on fixing the particular hack. But if you don't have backup, you will probably have to start from scratch or do a lot of cleaning, and that will cost you a lot of money. So I'd suggest make sure you always have automatic backup set up. And these are some tools and resources that I would suggest you take back with you. One is Search Console, which is the Search Console tool where Google gives you all the information on crawling of your website, how your website is shown in Google, if there's any hack issues, if there's any security issues, and whatnot. And of course, it also gives you the stats for your website, search analytics stats. And then the other one is mobile-friendly tool, which you've seen. And finally, the SEO Starter Guide, which pretty much all I've covered today, SEO Starter Guide has it. You can take pictures or if anything. And yeah, that's it with my session. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Yeah. Questions? Sorry?
How can we make a knowledge panel?
So you can't make a knowledge panel, but you can use structured data to tell Google about the organization or person or whatever. So you can use this schema called schema.org/organization, right? You can read up on that. So when you type schema.org/organization, so you'll get a list of markup vocabulary, where once you apply that to your company, right? So Google will read that, and depending upon like your user count and how many queries your search is getting, if we think it's relevant, we will show a knowledge panel for that. All right, thank you.